All right, Monday morning podcast, and we have hit a new low on the season. Fresh off this Duke game, Tim Leonard, Tyler Aki, we're going to try and recap whatever the heck just happened down in Durham, and also just talk big picture, run through your Twitter responses, because that's what happens when you're 9-10 and you just get blown out by a Duke team on the road. So a lot of thoughts, a lot of fired up takes, a lot of angry tweets out there to get to, all coming up on the pod today.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome on in. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single weekday. It's some days soon we might have to start talking about the lacrosse season, the way things are heading. But as of right now,
movie recommendations.
Yeah,
Tonight's a Euphoria night in my household. Tonight is a
Ozark
Euphoria
is back.
Night.
Have you been watching
Ozark
that?
is back. I haven't binged it yet, but I'm a huge Ozark guy. I do need to get into that too.
Yeah, I'm 2 episodes in. It's off to a great start. I'm hearing some good things.
Love
I'll
it.
probably dip into that, honestly, after we wrap up. We're recording right before the NFL playoff games. I got a big afternoon of NFL playoffs and then Ozark episodes that I'm really looking forward to. But today's episode brought to you by Sonos. Experience the game like never before with Sonos Arc, the premium smart soundbar for TV, movies, music, gaming, and more. Visit Sonos.com to learn more. So we always say this, but don't even know really where to start. I guess we'll begin with just our initial takeaways from the game. And then in the back half of the show, we'll dive into a lot of the Twitter conversation that was out there and the Twitter thoughts that we got. But overall takeaways from the game for me, it just exposed the talent gap, similar to the Auburn game, maybe even more so in this game where Duke's got 5 stars out there. And also a first half takeaway was I have never seen Syracuse miss that many open shots. And I know it's a cliche, and Jim Boeheim always talks about how you got to hit shots and so on and so forth. And they weren't going to win this game by any stretch of the imagination, even if they did hit shots, because the talent gap was so wide. But man, did they miss a lot of open shots right out of the gate.
At the conclusion of that game, I thought to myself, and there were a lot of angry fans yesterday, and rightfully so. All right. There was a lot to be angry about yesterday, but no one should have been mad that Syracuse lost. Both you and I expected Syracuse to go out and lose that game, right? I think the entire fan base expected Syracuse to go out and lose that game. But to lose that one in the way and the fashion that they did, it was one of the most disheartening things I've seen as a Syracuse fan. I thought there was zero effort. It felt like a sleepy game off the bus, a little noon game at Cameron. You should be getting up for those games. Cameron Indoor Stadium is one of the meccas of college basketball. You should not be taking it for granted that you get to go play there in front of Coach K and a chance to take down one of the best teams in the country. Every single other team that has gone in there this season has given Duke a shot. Again, we talked about the double-edged sword right now of Duke being the best team in the conference. It means, A, you're probably going to cruise, and there's not a lot of chances. Every loss pretty much feels like a bad loss for Duke because there's such a significant gap between them and the second best team in the conference. However, you're also going to get everyone's best shot. Syracuse did not give Duke their best shot. I've seen a number of Duke games this year, whether it's Florida State, Miami, even teams like Georgia Tech. Like, they go in there and give Duke all they can handle. Now, maybe down the final 10 minutes or so, they start to crumble a little bit, and that's to be expected when the game starts to stretch out and there is that talent gap. But to me, this game was over after 5-10 minutes. And I'm not talking about game time. I'm talking about real time. They beat them off the bus, and it was embarrassing to watch.
So I don't think it was as much of an effort thing as maybe you do, because they did kind of rally back and cut it to 1, and then they had some open looks that would have tied the game. There was a stretch in the middle of the first half where it felt like they squandered some chances there. To me, this is just they went up in playing competition in the ACC, and they don't have the horses. They don't have the talent to compete with Duke. And it's hard for me to knock the effort too much. Was the effort good in the second half? Probably not. And the second half, it got really, really ugly. But it felt like Syracuse was trying. They just missed a ton of open shots. And when they're pretty much the only thing they can do is make shots occasionally, and you're coming off a game where he scored 91 points, like, We know their defense stinks. We know they don't have the athleticism to compete with Duke, and they're missing shots. I mean, there's no way they're going to compete at that point. So this to me was just, they do not have the talent. And if it comes down to, was it a lack of talent or a lack of effort? I'm way more on the side of this was a lack of talent, and that's why they lost.
I think both are true. So the way I look at it as this, for the most part, even though Syracuse cut the final deficit to a 20-point game, felt more like 30. And it was hovering around 25-30 for most of the game. I don't think Duke is 25 points better, 30 points better than Syracuse. They're not, okay? They're better. They're like 10 to 15 points better than Syracuse, which in a power conference is a significant margin, and especially when you're talking about the caliber of programs that each of them run and the head coaches on each side. But to me, when you're losing by 20, 25, 30 points throughout the game, it shows the effort. And even though they were missing shots, a lot of sluggish stuff, a lot of being lazy coming off of screens, a lot of not hitting guys on screens, which we've talked about a number of times on this show.
But they always do that. They never hit guys on screens.
I know. And that's the thing. That to me shows a lack of effort. You're not trying to hit a guy. You're not trying to help your teammate get open. On top of that, defensively, at least at times we have seen effort being given on closeouts, albeit late. There has been effort. I saw a checkout from this team pretty much after 10 minutes of trying to get out on shooters and trying to make some sort of impact defensively.
What you're describing, I feel like, is more a lack of toughness than a lack of effort. And I totally agree with that.
I don't think effort and toughness kind of go hand in hand, though.
Yeah, I get that. But to me, it's like Syracuse doesn't play with an edge, and they haven't played with an edge all year. It's not that Buddy Boeheim is out there playing at 80% or not running as hard as he can. It's just he's a finesse player. Jimmy's a finesse player. And they're going up against a more athletic, more physical team, and they get exposed whenever they do that. In every instance this year, I don't feel like it's been so much that Buddy got off the bus and just didn't get up for the game. It's he went up against a team that sort of identified his flaws. And in this case, Syracuse is just not a talented team. And they finally played a talented team. They've been going through a stretch here where have they played some decent teams? Sure. And they've played some tight games on the road. But the ACC is not that good. If they were playing in the Big 12 or something, then we'd probably see these type of performances every night. It's just they hadn't played a team to this talent level. And you're right, they're probably 10, 15 points better. But then Syracuse shot the basketball bad, and Duke got some momentum at home, and it became a 25, 30-point game that ended up being 20 points. But like you said, it really was more of a 30-point loss.
In the case of Buddy, I mean, this was just a clunker from him. And that happens with shooters. You're going to have bad games. I will say this. I saw a lot of Buddy hate on the timeline. All right. And listen, he deserves criticism. He played a terrible game in this one. Yeah. He'd admit as much. He's probably just as pissed as the average fan is over his performance. If you're pointing the finger at Buddy Boeheim for this team's struggles, you're misdirecting the entirety of your anger. Has Buddy had some bad games this year? Absolutely. He's also won you a couple games this year as well. He is the most talented player on this team. He's leading the team in scoring for a reason as well.
I don't know if he's the most talented, but it's not a very talented team. So
it's not a very talented team, but he is the best player on this team. I don't think there's any way to navigate around that point. But right now, if you're angry at Buddy Boeheim, like there are so many other avenues you can be channeling that anger at right now. When you look at his brother, who defensively has been a nightmare this season, B, the development of some of these younger players on the team and not getting to see as much of maybe a Benny Williams as you would have liked, and just not seeing him go out and perform to the magnitude that you would have liked. I think, and then the transfer stuff, all that, like Cole Swider has been a disappointment for the most part this year. Like Buddy Boeheim's the last person to be pointing the finger at for the entirety of this team's struggles. If you want to point him out for this game, sure, go for it. But to blame him for the entirety of this team's struggles and saying this is a nepotistic play by Jim Boeheim to have his son out there, Buddy's not the son you should be pointing at for this one.
No, I totally agree with that. We got one response from Frank who said basically like, Jim just set up this program so that Julie can watch her sons play D1 basketball and they aren't much more than D2 talent. Jimmy is probably not talented enough to be a starter at Syracuse. Buddy is probably not talented enough to be your number one option. And he'd
be a damn good number two.
He'd be a solid number two. I mean, like on a good Syracuse team, maybe not. He is fourth in the conference in scoring, though. And he took you on an NCAA tournament run just last year. So I'm with you. He's a solid ACC player that is asked to be a number one. And this year, teams have been able to key in on him. And even in this game, he got some clean looks, and it just felt like he was tight. And to your earlier point, I don't know if they got off the bus just like hungover or lack of effort. I think it's more they got off the bus and they started the game and they understood the magnitude of the game and they played tight. And that's what we're seeing with Benny Williams when he's out there. I had some people that were at the game texting me that Benny in warmups couldn't make a thing. And I think there's something in there. Like Jimmy gets to the free throw line and he can't make a free throw. And that's not an effort thing. That's not as much of like,
that's between the years.
It's confidence, mental block, tightness thing. And that's the way this team is playing right now because they're 9-9 and this was their last chance to sort of revive the season. And they understood the magnitude of the game and it's a big time ESPN game and all that. And they came out really tight. And Joe Girard and Buddy and Jimmy all miss shots. And when they're missing shots, forget about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at what this team, you brought it up earlier, and I think you put it perfectly. There's no edge on this team. Like, remember how we used to talk about, this was 2 seasons ago now, the last Elijah Hughes year. Elijah Hughes was a killer. And even look back at a guy like Tyus Battle, killer. Like a guy you want to have that edge in crunch time. You think about some of the traditional killers that the Syracuse team has had, whether it's GMAC, Devo, like there's been a number of them on this team, even especially at the guard position too. And Buddy, he doesn't have that killer instinct to him right now. He's a damn good player. I really like Buddy Boeheim, but he doesn't have that killer instinct. He's shown it a couple times. And we always talked about this when this team had Elijah Hughes. When Elijah would go down, remember he got hurt against NC State and I believe against Miami too towards the end of that season. And it was like, all right, who's going to be that guy that steps up with that killer mentality? And it was always Joe that stepped up. It was never Buddy to have that sort of edge to him out there on the floor. And I think we're starting to see the ramifications of that a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. That's something that Devo talks about a lot, how he's trying to get Buddy to be more of a killer and have that more. And the whole team needs that. But it starts with the leader. That's what you're seeing from UNC. They don't have a guy that's a vocal leader. Jesse Edwards, we've talked about, needs to be a little bit more vocal, maybe in the back half. But it's hard to poke at Jesse when he was one of the silver linings of this game. All right, we're going to get into some Twitter thoughts, and there were lots of them, so we appreciate that at our Twitter page at LO_Syracuse. We'll dive into those in just a second. First, I want to tell you guys about an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every single time they fill up. You just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code SCORE and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free. Use promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back. And there's no catch here. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app. Use promo code SCORE to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first deposit. That is promo code SCORE for the Get Upside app. So diving into some of these Twitter thoughts, and there are a whole lot of angry Twitter thoughts. Let's start out with this discussion.
This was the all-time. This was the most Twitter interaction we've had. At LO_Syracuse if you're not there already.
Right. It's great. We always tweet out something after a game and say, drop your takes here. And we got some R-rated takes as we asked for that we probably cannot read on this podcast. But if you're out there and you gave us some of those R-rated takes, we appreciate it because it made me chuckle.
That's what we asked for. Sure, it gave a nice little silver lining to the game. I will say this. We can't read all of them because A, there's a lot of them, and B, not all of them are safe for work here. But yeah, you want a good laugh, just go through some of our Twitter replies. It felt like I was reading through Pack Pride, the NC State infamous blog site that has, or the message boards, that it's like their version of Syracuse Fan. It was phenomenal.
All right, let's start with this one from Jeremy Long, one of our top sort of engagement of the responses, and it's about Rick Pitino. He says, give me a Rick Pitino coach Syracuse team next year. Boeheim has his kids' friends as a team this year, and the results show the game hasn't passed by him, but his dedication to the team has. We also got a response from Ellie saying, what do we have to do to get Rick Pitino? I'll say this. I've come to the conclusion that if you gave me all the power in the world, if I was magically John Wildhack next year, and you said, hey, Tim, what is your perfect scenario for Syracuse basketball? What is the one coach that you want next year? I think it's Rick Pitino.
I'm with you.
And like excluding, Coach K, Jay Wright, Mark Few, realistic candidates.
Yeah.
If I could pick who is the coach next year, it's Rick Pitino. I understand he comes with baggage, but in order to dig this program out of where it is, you need to win games. You need to develop talent. You need to get talent in. And by winning games, that allows you to get talent in. And I think Rick Pitino is pretty much the best bet at doing that. And I would also say that my perfect scenario is pretty much just hire someone outside the family, because the in-family hires do not get me excited. And bringing back Jim Boeheim and running it back next year doesn't get me that excited either.
To a degree, Rick Pitino is an in-family hire.
Sure.
Former Syracuse assistant. Like, it's not too far-fetched. I'll say this. When has baggage ever deterred John Wildhack? I mean, with the amount of crap that he's allowed to go on at that university, when has baggage should be the least of your issues if you're John Wildhack, because it clearly is not part of your MO as an athletic director. And if there's a guy like Rick Pitino out there who started to clean up his image, he's coaching in college basketball right now. He's got Iona ranked higher than Syracuse in the net right now. Like, you got to think about it. You got to think about it. Rick Pitino is the best coach in America from an X's and O's standpoint. The best coach in America right now. I know he's been around the Syracuse program too. When he was on his little hiatus, he would come into Syracuse and be at some of the practices. Right. He's been around the program as of late. I bet you Rick Pitino watching this happen to Syracuse hurts him a little bit inside because of how good of a friend he is of Jim Boeheim's too. Like, if there's a guy who would love to take on this reclamation process while also having the chance to stick it to Louisville a couple times too during the year, kind of a match made in heaven. I love Rick Pitino. I know you love Rick Pitino. I'd love to have him as the head coach at Syracuse. I mean, it would be the perfect sort of segue. And now listen, here's the one thing about Pitino is that it would only be a handful of years, because he is up there in age as well. I don't have his exact age, but I think he's hovering around 70. But he could maybe
bridge the gap, and that's all we'd want. Because what I don't want right now is bring in a family candidate and have what's happening to UNC, right? Like, Hubert Davis wasn't a coach at the head coach level, and all of a sudden he's forced to coach this team, and it's got some new pieces, and it's not working out well at all. And is it all on Hubert Davis? I don't know, but I'm a little worried that if they just say, all right, GMAC, here you go, it's better maybe than what Boeheim is doing, because it's a different head coach. And I get a lot of people are probably clinging to the fact that GMAC and Red will change things, but I'm not so sure that that is the best way to go when you are Syracuse. And yes, your program's in the toilet right now, but also you have some weight. You can go out and get a legit head coach who is trending upwards, and not sort of roll the dice on a GMAC or a Red who has only learned under Jim Boeheim, right, and is probably going to have the same philosophies with a lot less credibility and a lot less experience as the head coach.
I think if you're going to have a GMAC, and I know Red's assisted at other places too, but if you're going to have a GMAC step in, I would still like to have GMAC see at least another way of thought. And I think I don't think this would be the worst thing in the world either. Having Pitino come in, be the head coach for a handful of seasons, and then just having GMAC sort of learn under Pitino as well. Get another Hall of Famer's perspective. Or here's another scenario for you. Have Pitino come in, bring back Mike Hopkins to be an assistant, and then groom Hop up that way. Because Hop's learned a lot from his failures at Washington. I'm sure he's learned a lot. And I don't think he's going to be wherever his next stop is, because he's going to have another head coaching job at some point during his career.
Yeah,
he's not going to be as bad as,
though.
I don't know where it is, but yeah. I know he will have one, and I know he will be a better coach for it. We see reclamation prospects in coaching all the time. Football, basketball, baseball, like guys get another look, and they usually perform better. I wouldn't be opposed to it. But yeah, it's certainly an appealing name that's out there in the ether right now, and I'm glad that you and I aren't the only ones thinking that way too.
Yeah, and shout out to Ted, who tweeted at us, and he tweets at us a lot. He said it's time for the Macna era, or the
McNamara, but
yeah,
spelled
a good play on
ERA
words
at the
there.
end. Yeah, I saw that too. I enjoyed that one.
I hadn't ever thought of that, and now I'm going to steal that, Ted, and I'm going to say it on the podcast for going
But we
forward
will
if
attribute you
you're
every
allowed.
single time. Ted's the guy I met at the Garden, too.
I know,
when Syracuse played Villanova.
Yeah, so that was a clever one, and a couple of my friends tweeted me that and got a kick out of it. So props to Ted for that, but I don't know if that's my first pick. I think if I was power ranking right now, it would be Rick Pitino 1, the rest of the out of family
2.
Yeah, sizable gap 2, but also like next in line would not be GMAC. It would probably be just other out of family candidates. Insert name there that you think is sort of a trending coach. I mean, Nate Oates is unrealistic, but an outside of the family candidate that is trending up. Maybe Willard or Ed Cooley, or Ed Cooley's kind of older, but another outside the family candidate. And then I would get to sizable gap. Probably for me, whether it's Jim coming back next year or GMAC coming in as his first year next year, or Red coming in next. I don't know if that makes a huge difference. I do think Jim Boeheim's got to go at some point here, and this thing's getting pretty stale. But I worry that it gets even worse after Jim leaves and you insert an assistant coach like we're seeing at UNC.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, the drop-off is going to be steep. Now, I do think there is one potential way to get this thing back on the tracks with Jim Boeheim at the helm, and it is if Mike Hopkins gets fired at Washington, you bring Hop back in. You listen to it on Devo's podcast all the time. How many of those guys come on and say, Mike Hopkins is the reason I stayed? You see all these guys going to the transfer portal right now. Mike Hopkins is the reason that some of those guys would have potentially stayed at Syracuse. Who knows? Maybe you still have a Kadari. Maybe you still have a Quincy Guerrier on your roster right now, if you still have Mike Hopkins as your assistant coach. And I think that would also make the transition process a little bit easier too, if you did have Hop and you were trying to groom him to be the next head coach, because he can reestablish himself as a recruiting force in the Northeast. Then that way, when there is some sort of succession plan in place, if you do elevate Mike Hopkins, you're not going to lose recruits, because it is Mike Hopkins, the guy who probably is doing the primary recruiting for you at some of these higher prep schools and Northeast area programs.
All right, let's put a pin in that, because I'm glad you brought that up. And there's a couple more Twitter thoughts along those lines that I want to discuss in just a second. But BetOnline would like to wish you guys a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year, new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, just use our promo code Locked On, all one word, LOCKEDON. That gets you a 50% welcome bonus. Football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games are all over at BetOnline, which is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Hey, it's the new year, and that means New Year's resolutions, and Tim and I have ours. It's about getting fit and eating healthier, and Built Bar is certainly a part of that plan. It's the protein bar that tastes even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll actually want to eat it, unlike some of the other protein bars out there on the market. You want to eat healthy, but it can get really boring, and by like week 3, you're thinking, hey, not worth it. Where's the chocolate? Well, guess what? Good news for you. Built Bars are covered in 100% chocolate. They've got 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to candy bars, which hover around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of carbs. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least enjoy a treat that tastes good and is good for you as well. That way, when you enjoy a delicious Built Bar, you can almost count it as a workout. And we've got tons of flavors to give you as well. Coconut almond, our personal favorite on the podcast is peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, and many, many more. And they're always coming out with new limited time flavors as well. So check out Built.com often to see what's new. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
So keeping with these Twitter thoughts, I want to talk about the transfer portal era a little bit and how that impacts Syracuse going forward. Evan had a good thought here. He says, Jimmy, and I think he's referring to Jim Boeheim in this, Jim Boeheim is a legend and deserves to go when he wants. With that being said, CBB has changed. Jimmy is great at development, but it needs time. The transfer portal makes teams more about the current year as opposed to years down the road. Adjustments are needed. And that got me thinking, along with the Athletic article that was out this week on basically how much tampering goes on and these inside stories of how the transfer portal era is changing college basketball. And one of my big takeaways from that article was, wow, these kids are very quick to jump, and AAU coaches are breathing down their neck with, hey, I saw you played 5 minutes last night. Let's get you to another school. There's more options out there. And I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's been brushed aside a little more than it should be, that there is probably not a single coach in America that is hurt more by this change in college basketball than Jim Boeheim. Like, the transfer portal era minimizes his coaching style more than any other coach in America, I think, because he only plays 7 to 8 guys and he does not play freshmen very often. So why would they come or why would they stay? Because they're not getting the run. And also they play a 2-3 zone defense that this is our second year now of seeing. We brought in a lot of transfers. Let's see how the 2-3 zone works. And yes, this roster just wasn't equipped from an athleticism standpoint, but it takes time to learn the 2-3 zone. I know he's pushed back on that in other articles and stuff, but even Eric Devendorf has told me, it takes time to learn that. And we see it from other former players as well. So the transfer portal era impacting Syracuse down the road is a big storyline, in my opinion, and one that we've talked about, but maybe not talked about enough.
It's Syracuse in the mid-majors that it's killing. Like, Syracuse, it hurts because from a stylistic point, yeah, it takes time to groom yourself into that defense. And then the mid-majors, obviously, it hurts because a lot of their best players opt to go to bigger programs. And whether or not they find success is kind of beyond their control and beyond their care as well. And you kind of summed it up earlier, too. And there was another tweet that we got from Freebeer77. He says, I hold 2 simultaneous truths. 1, Jim has earned the right to retire when he chooses. 100% agree. 2, he should choose to retire. Like,
that's a good tweet. Yeah.
But like, he's right. Like, has Jim built this program up? Yeah. Like, we talk about all the time. Like, we prod at Sienna, right? On this show all the time. Like, Sienna Joe, all that stuff. Like, without Jim Boeheim, this program might be Sienna, right? Like, let's not, like, it is middle of nowhere, upstate New York. Like, this program could be Sienna if it weren't for Jim Boeheim building it. He deserves all that credit for getting them to the Big East, making them a brand name program, getting them into the ACC. That's Jim Boeheim, and he deserves a ton of credit. He's built this program. He's the only reason people like you and I care about this program, right? But at the same time, it has passed him by. You can clearly tell it. You can clearly tell it stylistically, the way that the players are responding, and just, I mean, some of the rumblings around town. Like, it's frustrating, and that's why this hurts so much. I saw some people saying, like, oh, this is just Syracuse fans bitching and moaning. Like, this is classic Syracuse fans. They're always pessimistic. They can never be happy with anything. We went to the Sweet 16 last year. We've got X amount of Sweet 16s and Final Fours over the span of X years. Yeah, you've built that standard up. So when you give people a taste of it, and in this case, it's not a taste, it's a full 3-course meal that you've given us of success over a historical period of time. We expect to have that every single year. And when it's not delivered, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be pissed off. You're going to call for change. And I think it's natural to do that. And when it's getting to the point now where you had regular season success perennially, and to the point where it is now where you're not having regular season success, you get a couple flare-up upsets here and there, and that's pretty much the juice for your regular seasons. You're not having success in your conference tournaments. It pisses you off. And Syracuse fans have the right to be upset about all that.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said. One thing off of that is you talked about how the fan base is looking for these silver linings and the positives. And I tweeted something out yesterday saying, like, what's the light at the end of the tunnel? And I really mean that because, we get one response here from Markets in Turmoil is the Twitter page. He says, remain positive. Lots of chances left to get into the tourney. First off, totally disagree with that. I mean,
that one.
It's 0%. Let's call it what it is. Our guy Lee should be eating his shoe already right now, or saying he would eat his shoe, I should say, because of what happened last year. But he then says, we saw a lot of what Symir is and what his ceiling is. Kid has lots of upside, and we are literally seeing improvements game by game as he has provided more court time. Has Symir played nice recently? Yes. Has he improved? Yes. Does he have a high ceiling? I still say no. And
I still say no.
If your silver lining here is, well, remember, like,
is your backup transfer point guard? That's a
who
problem.
Had 2 points at Marquette. Like Symir is a nice role piece. And that's all he is.
He's
I don't
played
ever
his role
see him
well this year. Like, let's put it how it is. He's played his role well this year.
Yeah.
He's
and
not
he
a
should
star.
probably play more. I'm not like dogging Symir, but when your silver lining is, hey, remember that guy we added who can't really shoot and isn't much of an offensive player? He could be our starter next year, and that could be one of our better players. I'm not that excited about that. I'm sorry.
No.
Like, he doesn't have that high of a ceiling. He has a pretty high floor, and I think he's a solid player that I'm happy to have around for the next couple of years. But I don't get pushing Symir has a strong ceiling. I just don't see that.
Listen, if that's your silver lining from the season, then the expectations of the program, A, never call yourself a blue blood ever again. And B, it just shows where the program is as a whole right now. There is one silver lining and one silver lining only that you can take away from this season, and it's Jesse Edwards. The development that he's put together this year is remarkable, and it's one of the best developments we've seen out of a Syracuse player in the last 5 years. So to see him make the leap that he has, especially at a position that Syracuse has not developed well lately, it's important. But here's another thing that Jim Boeheim throws out there. And he said this the other day, how Jesse's better than 90% of centers. I'd probably say that number is actually maybe even a little bit higher. Might be closer to like 95% of centers in the college basketball right now, with the development that he's made and the strides. And also the role that he's being asked to take on defensively too is not easy, especially for a guy who's picked up basketball relatively late and probably doesn't have those same basketball instincts that someone who's been playing since he's been the age of 5 is. But what does Jim Boeheim also say about the center position? He basically says it's a guards game. And if there's one place where you wanted to see development, it's at the point guard position. We talk about this with Jeff Goodman all the time. You hear every single college basketball analyst harp on the point guard position. And right now, the development has not been there for Joe Girard as a point guard. Has Joe Girard gotten better from freshman year to now? Yes, but more so in the sense of a two-guard. I don't even know if he has,
but yeah.
I mean, he's shooting 45% from 3 right now. Like that's getting better.
Sure, but his turnover rate has gone the other direction.
Again, that is part of the development as a point guard. If he was a 2-guard, he wouldn't be turning the ball over at the rate he is right now. He's out of position. You tried to develop him as a point guard. It's not going to happen at this point. He's a junior right now. He has 2 years of eligibility left if he decides to use them. I'd imagine he's going to use all 5 this year of his career, if you had to guess. You got to have him as a 2-guard. Has to be. And if you can develop him there, fine. But right now, you need a development at the point guard, and you haven't done it.
Yeah, I really think Joe, as a freshman, was pretty much the same player he is as a junior. And I say that because if he was going to get better, then he would have gotten better as a point guard, the position that he's playing. Maybe he's shooting it more efficient, yes. But to me, he had some big games as a freshman, and he, at the end of his freshman year, left optimism that, okay, maybe in his second year as the true point guard could take some steps up. Here we are in year 3, and it's pretty much understood now that he's never going to be a good true point guard, or he's never going to be a great assist to turnover ratio guy and be that type of guy that they need. The other thing that bothered me is an expectation thing, and we can end on this. This will be my final thought, at least. Boeheim postgame gets on there, and he's saying stuff like, you know, we played pretty good in the league, and I think we're going to continue to be good, and it's been a pretty good season for us. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he's saying, you know, this has been our only game. We just haven't been in it in the league. One, the league stinks. I mean, let's call it what it is. He gets on there and he's trying to pump up BC and Wake Forest and Pitt and these teams. The ACC is terrible this year. It's never been this bad since Syracuse has entered the conference, and they still stink, and they're having their worst year. Well,
Tony Bennett said it last year. Tony Bennett said it in a preseason podcast leading into this year. He said the league was down last year. And it's worse than that. So if a coach from last year, a national championship winning coach at one of the higher end programs in the conference, is saying the league was down last year, which you'll rarely hear a coach admit in public, right? When they say that, and it's gotten worse this year, then it shows where the state of the conference is right now. Because guess what? The programs that are supposed to pump this conference up and make it what they are, you think back to the year that Syracuse went to the Sweet 16, what was that, 2018, right? With Tyus Battle leading the way. The reason why the ACC was so good that year, had a couple of 1 seeds, is because you had a program like Syracuse who was, what did they finish in the league that year? Like 10th or 9th or something like that? And that team was good enough to get to the Sweet 16. And you had a ton of these different programs that were getting to Elite Eights and Sweet 16s. And like Syracuse or the ACC had like 7 of the Sweet 16 teams or something like that. Like
Yeah.
That's what makes the ACC great. When you've got a good Syracuse, you've got a good Louisville, you've got a good Virginia, you've got a good Florida State. UNC isn't in the dumpster like it is right now. You get some pop-up contributions from a team like Clemson and Virginia Tech. Those are the teams that need to make the ACC great. We know Duke's going to be great every single year, but you need the part of the reason why
sucked last year,
right?
So
part of the reason why the ACC is bad is because Syracuse is one of the teams that's supposed to be carrying the mantle to make this a respectable conference, and they're not doing their job.
No, I would say the three biggest disappointments in the entire college basketball landscape this year are Syracuse, UNC, Louisville, in that order, and they're all ACC teams. So
I wouldn't say in that order.
No, sorry, in any order. I didn't mean to. I meant to say that. Sorry.
In no particular order.
Those are the three biggest disappointments. So anyway, that's one problem with what I have Boeheim saying. But the bigger problem is you can't get on in the summer and hype up your team and say it's the best shooting team I've ever had. Remember all the Frank Anselem hype in the summer? I mean, he was selling Frank Anselem, and he doesn't even play him. And also, when Frank's out there, he doesn't look very good. So I don't even blame him that much for not playing him because Jesse's looking a lot better than him. But you can't be selling this team to be a really good team and getting the fan base excited about the team and then turn around in the middle of late January here and be 9-10 overall and say, we're playing pretty good in the league and we'll be good the rest of the way. And acting like, oh yeah, it's just, another year. We're 9-10. We don't pay attention to the record. We're just getting better. No, that's unacceptable at your program. If
not
you're going to
paying attention to the record is one of the most comical things I've ever heard. Because guess what?
Stupid.
Unless you're going out and winning that ACC tournament, you're not getting in with a sub 500. All right. And guess what? If you do win the ACC tournament, you're not going to be a sub 500 team. So, the record matters. Okay. It matters. Resume matters. All that stuff matters. And guess what? The rest of the way, you've got one resume building win to plus whatever ACC tournament. So you've got two potential resume building wins the rest of the way. Two of them. Good luck to you.
Yeah. I don't know. That's all I have. I just think the expectation should be higher from Jim Boeheim. And maybe it is. I mean, he has been hard on the defense, and I think he is definitely upset with the way this season is going. But don't get on the post-game presser and talk about how we played pretty good this year when you're now 3-5 in a terrible conference, and the worst the conference has been since you've entered the league.
And one of those wins is Pitt, we talk about the Siena, Pitt and Iona. Iona would kick the hell out of Pitt right now because of a coaching advantage, and really that's it. Because Pitt's terrible. They don't deserve, they're not playing at a Power 5 level right now. You've got two teams in your conference that are not playing Power 5 level basketball right now in BC and Pitt.
BC beat Virginia Tech, but that goes to show you that the league.
Virginia Tech's not playing Power 5 level basketball ever since they started ACC play.
Yeah. So, and by the way, our next podcast, we'll cut it here because we got, I guess, a Pitt preview tomorrow. I'm sure we'll be talking mostly about Syracuse and our frustrations boiling over from this episode. But look, Pitt is a team that could beat Syracuse at home on Tuesday. That's the way this team is playing right now. That's how bad it's getting. And we'll have more of your Twitter thoughts, more reaction to this Duke game, more big picture talk throughout the week. We're going to try and get a former player on maybe to just talk about the state of the program some when we have some downtime this week. And if any other news comes up, we're here for you guys. So thanks for listening today. Thanks for listening to us rant. I'm sure you guys are just as frustrated or maybe even more frustrated than we are. So always tweet at us your thoughts at LO_Syracuse, and we will talk to you guys on the podcast tomorrow.